So my name's Claire Hughes, and I'm a professor at the University of Cambridge. I'm a fellow of Newnham College and deputy director of what used to be the Centre for Family Research that has become the Centre for Child, Adolescent and Family Research. Executive function, in a nutshell, is the set of higher order cognitive processes that underpin our ability to make flexible, goal-directed responses, to react adaptively to changes in the environment. And the three key components of this would be inhibiting the wrong thing, the thing that's wrong in that particular context, holding information in mind so that you remember what it is you have to do, and being flexible in being able to shift between one kind of response and another kind of response. And so I think it's really important for both teachers and parents to recognise that when children come into the school environment, which is a very complex environment, that suddenly the demand for their executive skills is much higher than it was before. And we know that the extent to which children do well on our sorts of head, toes, knees and shoulders tasks, or whatever other tasks we use to look at executive function, those who do well tend to do well academically down the line. And those who do poorly often also show behavioural problems. So they might be disruptive in class or restless and inattentive. And it's really important not to think about that behaviour as this is a naughty child or a child who doesn't listen, but thinking about it as this is a child who's maybe struggling to hold on to all this information. And so we need to break it down into smaller pieces. Well, the condition that is most associated with problems in executive functions is ADHD, and that comes in different subtypes. So you might have a child who is dreamy and distractible and not very good at remembering the things they need to do, but they're not particularly impulsive. You might have another child who just seems very restless and makes those kinds of impulsive behaviours. And then you have some children who have a kind of combined form. So that's the range of behaviours that you'd be looking for when you're thinking about a child with poor executive functions. You can break things down into smaller routines so that children know that this is what we do on a Monday, and you don't have to remember for the whole week. You're just having to remember what we do on a Monday. That can help. A lot of early years school settings are now reducing the amount of visually distracting material that they have in the classrooms. So we used to have lots of attractive things hanging from the ceiling, and it's all meant to make it feel fun and enriching. But actually that can be quite overwhelming for some children. So going for a sort of simpler environment physically can be helpful as well. And then, of course, children are going to have to build up those executive function skills. So thinking about what you can do that enables children to improve in that way. Previous studies, including some of my own work, seem to have consistently shown that East Asian children, compared with children in Europe or North America, are about 2 years ahead in terms of their executive function skills. And there's a lot of interest in whether that's something about the collectivist culture that means that they're having to think about putting other people's needs before their own, that mean that they learn that self-control quite early on. And so when we began our study, which was during the pandemic, we were expecting to find something like that. But because it was in the pandemic, we had to do all our assessments remotely. And that meant that we were giving children tasks through Zoom when they were at home with the caregiver. And I think that context is significant because actually what we found was no real difference in executive function skills across the two sites, across sort of East versus West, if you like. And that makes me think that all the previous literature, which I think has exclusively been based in schools, might actually be tapping into cultural differences in how you behave in school, and in particular how you behave when somebody comes in to run some assessments. Bringing your whole self to making sure that the classroom is a kind of warm, fun, safe environment so that the children do feel comfortable, and so that allows them to start doing that kind of higher level thinking. Instead of being seen in a group of 8 or 10 or 12 students, they're often taught in groups of 2 to 4. And so that means that there's no hiding. If you don't understand something, you've got to just say you don't understand it, because you can't just lurk at the back of the class or anything like that. And so I think that means that the students really get stretched academically. The other thing I think is nice for students studying here is that we have colleges, which are like glorified halls of residence. And so that's where you eat and sleep, but it's also where there'll be a library and where there'll be a bar and there'll be lots of sort of social things.